On today's episode of Locked On Wilds, might Billy Guerin get on the phone with Pat Verbeek again this offseason?
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, if it's a good old-fashioned hockey trade Billy Guerin wants, we've got three names that could be intriguing if Marco Rossi is indeed going to get moved. We'll take a look at a couple of players from the Pacific and one from the East who all could potentially benefit from a change of scenery. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, credentialed media member, and it's the Bill Guerin special. The good old-fashioned hockey trade, whether it be Cam Talbot for Philip Gustafsson, Greg Pattern for Ian Cole, Bill Guerin is not afraid to shake things up and make a good old-fashioned hockey trade, not for prospects or picks, but for something that can help you right now. And again, important to mention, the preferred route is to keep Marco Rossi on the roster, but if Marco Rossi is indeed going to be moved with the Minnesota Wilds moving into their window for contention, you want something that's going to be able to help you with that window now as opposed to down the line, which points to more of a hockey trade that is going to be made for something that can help you out this season. Now, considering what we know about this situation and Bill Guerin's preference to have a center or wing that's a little on the taller side, we factor that into the equation, and these are not big fish. We've talked about Tage Thompson already. We will probably talk about Dylan Larkin here coming up. I know that was mentioned in one of Denny's last live shows. So we'll talk about Larkin. That qualifies as more of a big fish, though, where you would need to add in a little more to the equation to make those happen. I want to talk about some names where Marco Rossi is a swap, and that might be about all that is needed to make it happen. Now, we're going to start off with one that is probably not super likely, but let's consider where the team themselves is at. And this one was actually brought to my attention by a listener. Let's talk a little bit about Matty Beniers in Seattle. Now, I have been reluctant to explore this as a possibility because the numbers that Beniers has put up over the last couple of seasons don't really wow me. And what I guess have been looking for in a player like Beniers is somebody that just jumps off the page as the clear-cut standout for that Seattle Kraken team. But I think it is important to consider what a player is working with on their lines. I pull up the line combinations for the last game of the season that the Seattle Kraken had, which was April 15th. Matty Beniers, top center for the Seattle Kraken. He had on his wing Jaden Schwartz and Capo Caco. Not great. And for a guy in Beniers who has 20 goals, 2 out of his 3 full seasons at the NHL level, all told, 43 points in 82 games this past season. He had a career high in ice time at 18 minutes, 41 seconds. Career high in shots, total shot attempts at 322. One off of his career high in shots on goal with 147. He won faceoffs at a 47.7% clip And, he had 5 power play goals, was an even net 0 after being a minus 11 last year. But the thing that kind of jumps out to me is, from a point shares perspective, pretty even. Beniers was a 2.1 offensively this past year and a 1.8 defensively for a grand total of 3.9. Where does that rank amongst Minnesota Wild players this past season, you may ask? It's a great question. Well, as we look at it, the point shares for let's go offense first. And Beniers, as we mentioned, had 2.1 offensive point shares this past season. That would rank him 6th amongst Wild players, just ahead of Freddie Gaudreau. Defensive point shares, 1.8 would tie him with Kirill Kaprizov. And the total point shares of 3.9, that would put him at 9th on the team ahead of Freddie Gaudreau. Now, point shares aside, looking at some of the offensive numbers, shots on goal, 147 would rank 4th. That would be ahead of Kirill Kaprizov, granted, who played just 41 games. But 147 shots on goal would be 4th on the team. The face-off winning percentage of 47.7 would be just below Ryan Hartman. But you take out Ben Jones, who only played 26 games. You take out Devin Shore. You take out Brendan Gaunce. He would be 3rd on the team in faceoffs. And it's not like Beniers took a small amount of faceoffs either. He had just under 1,200 this past season and was at 47.7%. Now, why would Seattle do this? Let's talk about the big question here. Why would Seattle trade a guy who they committed 7 years and $50 million to be kind of the face of their franchise? I don't know if you've been paying attention to the Seattle Kraken here recently, but they're a bit of a mess. Ron Francis, who put the roster together, there was head scratching as to that roster construction from the get-go, from the inaugural expansion draft. The Kraken overachieved, got to and won a round in the postseason in their second year of existence. It has been nothing but downhill ever since. And that led to the hiring and then firing of Dan Bylsma in the course of a 1-year span. That led to Ron Francis being elevated to president of hockey operations and also removed from general manager, which is the NHL equivalent of saying, hey, we're not going to outright fire you, but we are going to take your responsibilities away because of how this roster has fallen. So it is a bit of a mess. And the thing you would be banking on for Minnesota is that it is going to take 3-4 years for Seattle to probably start to get this process building in the right direction again. And does Beniers want to stick around for that? Does he want to, multiple seasons into his extension, does he want to be sticking around through, I mean, let's be honest, at this point, you've got a player like Shane Wright. It's probably going to be closer to a rebuild than it is to a retool. It's just not a good roster. So does Beniers want to stick around for that at the age of 23? Does he want to stick through that and try to help guide that team through it? Maybe, maybe not. But if he doesn't, he would be an intriguing player to try to yank off that roster under an affordable term, brings you good defensive value. I think there is something to the fact that he didn't have great line mates. Would that translate with better line mates? That would be intriguing enough to see. And does it check Billy's boxes? He's 6'2", 181. So 6 foot plus center. Check that box. Also an interesting Wrinkle here. Beniers, much like Matt Boldy, Massachusetts. Boldy was born in Milford. Beniers was born in Hingham, Massachusetts. So both Massachusetts boys. That's an interesting kind of tie-in as well. I rate this one as pretty unlikely to happen because, again, I feel like this maybe happens a year or two down the road as Seattle fully gets into their process. But I think there's a reason that it's taken them as long as it has to find a coach, because this is going to be messy. It's going to be a messy process for Seattle to cultivate that roster. And if Beniers doesn't want to stick around through that, would be worth looking into for the Minnesota Wild. Now, that's one name. We have another name that is an impending potential free agent, a restricted free agent for a young team out west. Could he benefit from a bit of a change of scenery? We will take a look at the possibilities of a Mason McTavish Marco Rossi swap. That's on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios are the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value in each serving. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I call them my guilt-free snack because when I'm watching playoff hockey or the Minnesota Timberwolves in the Western Conference Finals, I don't have to feel guilty about grabbing a handful or two because I always have them on hand. Everydayers have heard me mention I've got a bag on me at all times. The honey roasted, no shells. Always in a Tupperware container right over on my coffee table, ready to rock. Whether it's one handful or two or a bag, let's be honest, we've been there. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. We are your team each and every day as well. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Memorial Day weekend schedule for you. We'll have an episode ready to rock from the drop on Monday. Alex and I will be recording Monday night for Tuesday. We're still working on ironing out when the next live show is going to be because section tournament baseball and softball underway, and will be going on, I think, basically from the time that Memorial Day weekend is done through the week. So we'll work on that. I will be out of town, so we'll get you one as soon as we can. Just trying to iron that out. So the moment we know, we'll let you know. Let's move on to another player who could be potentially looking at a change of scenery here this season. Mason McTavish is in the final year of his entry-level contract. 22 years old. He again fits the height requirements, 6'1", 219, for Billy's desire to have a little bigger of a center. And if you look at the numbers for McTavish, he played in 76 games this past season, 22 goals, 30 assists, 52 total points. He had a net 0 as far as plus minus goes, 38 penalty minutes, which was down from his 86 in 2023-2024. I think that Ducks team was feisty and took a lot of penalties late in games as things kind of got away from him. This year, obviously not as much. McTavish with 180 shots on goal, 352 total shot attempts. He shot 12.2%, played 16 minutes, 53 seconds of time on ice per game, won 50.7% of his faceoffs, and that was in just under 1,000 faceoffs taken this past season. Looking at some of the other numbers here as well, McTavish racked up 3.8 offensive point shares, which was a career high, 1.3 defensive point shares, which was a career high, and 5.2 total point shares, which was also a career high. Now, where would those numbers rank amongst Minnesota Wild players? Let's start with the shots on goal. 180 shots on goal would rank second on the team for this past season. Second on the team as far as shots on goal go. McTavish would also have been the third member of the 20-goal club, and he would have been the fifth member of the 50-point club. As far as faceoffs go, faceoff wins, he would have been second on the team, just ahead of Marco Rossi. And 50.7% on the dot amongst qualifying centers would have been number one. Point shares look like this. Total point shares, let's go offense first. McTavish racked up 3.8 offensive point shares. That would have put him fourth on the team, just above Matt Zuccarello. Total point shares of 5.2 would have put him tied with Matt Zuccarello for seventh on the team. So there's a lot to like with Mason McTavish. Young player. He has a good frame to him. You know, the defensive metrics, not as good as, say, Beniers were. But you also got to keep in mind, it's the Anaheim Ducks. Not a great amount of roster that they have put together. But the question that we're going to run into with all three of these players is, why would the team, in this case the Ducks, why would the Ducks do this? Well, if you look at it, they've got Leo Carlsson locked in. He's going to be their number one center by far going forward. And Mason McTavish, in the final year of his ELC, with Robbie Fabry, Brock McGinn as potential unrestricted free agents, Isaac Lundestrom, Brett Leeson, both restricted free agents as well. Tim Wash as well will be. There is going to be some other money to be thrown around by Pat Verbeek and the Ducks. You obviously have the cap floor to contend with, so the Ducks they're not hurting for cap space, so that's not a deterrent. But it's a Ducks team that they took a step forward, but it feels like they still have a long way to go to get to where they want to be, which is a competent playoff team. Lucas Dostal really took them a long way, so he appears to be the answer in goal once John Gibson retires. But they've got a lot of work to do still on that roster. And again, is McTavish going to want to stick around for that? Is he going to stick around on that Ducks team? McTavish would be a potential option for an offer sheet for the Minnesota Wild, so it wouldn't necessarily cost them a Marco Rossi type player. Now, McTavish is from Switzerland, so doesn't have any specific ties to Anaheim other than being drafted third overall pick. You throw in maybe a sweetener. I don't know. I'm looking at options for the Wild if Bill Guerin is truly looking at hockey trade. And let's also not dismiss the fact that McTavish also wore number 23, so it's a clean swap there. But for the Ducks, if you think that McTavish is going to be part of the solution going forward, then they're just going to sign him to a long-term deal, which likely negates the ability for the Wild to make the trade. But if they have doubts as to whether McTavish fits into their long-term plans, good opportunity to acquire some picks if the offer sheet is the route you go, or a good old-fashioned hockey trade maybe to shake things up a little bit, because the offense was anemic for the Ducks. Beyond a couple of guys, McTavish included, they really could not score throughout the season. So just another name to consider as we navigate through this process. We have one more name for you, and we're headed out east for a guy who came on the scene red hot and has cooled off over the last couple of years. Is Dawson Mercer in need of a bit of a change of scenery? We'll discuss as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Once again, make sure to hit that like button on YouTube and subscribe if you have not already, so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Turning our attention now to the New Jersey Devils, who made it to the postseason but got absolutely worked by the Carolina Hurricanes. And now that they have Sheldon Keefe in tow, there is going to be a little bit of a roster tweak, one would think. And a name that has been brought up in different circles is the likes of Dawson Mercer. Mercer is 23 years old, but you look at what has happened to his production over the last couple of years. He's played 4 seasons at the NHL level and got off to a really, really good start. He had 27 goals and 56 points as a 21-year-old. Then the production dropped to 20 goals and 33 total points in 2023-2024. A little bit of a bump in points, but another drop in goals to 19 and 36 total points in 82 games. Penalty minutes, just 16 and 82. He's played 82 games every season he's been on the roster. Career high 6 power play goals. Career high in time on ice of 17 minutes, 53 seconds. Now, his faceoff numbers aren't great, 48.5%, but he took just right around 230 faceoffs. So not a ton in the way of faceoffs, but he is a goal scorer. He averages 21 goals per 82 games. He had 141 shots on goal, shot 13.5%, 280 total shot attempts for Mercer this past season. 3.7 total point shares, 1.4 offensively. That's not great. 2.2 defensively is pretty good. So where would those numbers rank amongst Minnesota Wild players from this past season? Well, let's start with the point shares. 3.7 would be 9th on the team, just ahead of Freddie Gaudreau. The 2.2 defensive point shares would be tied with Declan Chisholm from this past season. As far as shots on goal go, Mercer with his 141 would rank 5th on the team, just ahead of Joel Eriksson Ek. So Mercer, a player who I think maybe the Devils fans are starting to sour on a little bit. According to Daily Faceoff, in their last game, he was second-line center with Jesper Bratt and Eric Haula. And with a Devils team that obviously has lots of questions on their roster, it seems like they are going to be in position to make some changes, which could mean that they look for just a little bit of a different look on that second line, as opposed to a guy like Dawson Mercer. Now, Mercer is 6 foot, 180 pounds, and he is a Newfoundland native, was taken by New Jersey back in 2020 as the 18th overall pick in the first round. So this could be a potential option as well, because the shooting numbers have been pretty consistent. There's been a dip each year, but 27 goals, his career high in 2022, 2023. He shot 16.8% that year. He had 20 goals the next season. He went from 161 shots on goal to 134. Still shot 14.9%. Then he had a big bump in shot attempts, career high in shot attempts, and 141 shots on goal. Shot 13.5%. So his career average is 14.1%. So he was slightly below average this past season, but not a huge amount. Like within 1% is, I don't think, something that you raise red flags about. It's when your shooting percentage drops by 3-4%. That's when you maybe have to start looking at things. But as we tried to do with the other two, why would the Devils do this? Well, new coach in Sheldon Keefe, and now that they have seen what that team looks like under a full season with Keefe, now is when you start to see some of the tweaks that get put on this roster. And I could see Mercer being a buy low candidate, as his stock is seemingly dropped for a couple of seasons. The appeal on Mercer is that he is signed for the next 2 seasons at $4 million per season, and then he's a restricted free agent in 2027, 2028. So you would have him in the mix for the next 2 seasons at $4 million per year, which is pretty affordable. And then you would have an ability to make a decision after that. So that would be the appeal here, is all of the 3 players we've talked about, he brings the least cost from a salary perspective of the 3. Beniers brings the big contract that he signed with Seattle. McTavish, a restricted free agent. So if you brought him in, you'd want to sign him to an extension as well. But the question I have with a guy like Mercer is the drop in production. Like, is that cause for concern, or is that just kind of going toe-in-toe with how the Devils have been running here the last few years? The 2022-2023 season, if I recall correctly, they won 50-plus games that year and have just kind of gone in the wrong direction the last couple of seasons. So it could coincide with the fact that the team themselves has just not been as good over the last couple of years as they were in that season. But yeah, I'm just looking at that 2022-2023 season. They had 52 wins that year, and actually were one of the highest scoring teams in the East with 291 goals scored. So it's and if you look at what they've done since, they've still been a good team. They just don't have that same bite to them. 2023, 2024, they finished well out of the playoffs. They missed the postseason by 10 points, going 38, 39, and 5. And this past season, a step in the right direction at 42, 33, and 7. So could be that that his numbers dropping or just coinciding with that Devils team struggling a little bit the last couple of years. But it would be interesting to see if there is anything more to that. But who knows? Just a couple of potential change of scenery candidates here as we continue to just look at options. Again, important to note, we're not advocating for a Rossi trade, but if that is something that is on the table, it's foolish to not look at possibilities. And of the 3, I would think Mercer is probably the most likely. I would say Mercer, McTavish, and Beniers if we had to rank them 1, 2, 3. But you never know. There are conversations happening behind the scenes that nobody ever knows about, a la the John Klingberg discussion with Pat Verbeek from a couple of seasons ago, where Verbeek said, nah, I think we're going to keep Klingberg, and Billy said, yeah, sure you are. He could make those calls about McTavish. You never know. But that is going to do it for our episode here today. Appreciate everybody tuning in as you do each and every day of the week. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.